So thank you for being here. It's a delight and pleasure to be back in the chocolate city of DC. And I want to send a special thank you to the Landscape Architecture Foundation and all of its supporters to allow us to immerse ourselves in these inquiries. Yes. I would like to start by sharing just the title of my work, Engaging K through 12 STEAM Education, Public Education Efforts for Future Landscape Architects to address climate equity. And I'm using that broadly, not just equity in terms of climate of temperature, but also climate in terms of social justice and other issues as well. Let's get straight to the point, guys. If you look around, there's probably a few African Americans in here. Some of them are landscape architects. And if you look at the very bottom of this chart, you see that little golden line. It barely scratches right along the surface, almost like a bottom-feeding fish. That is right around, maybe 3% at most. At best, it's usually around 1%. And I'm not even going to talk about architects. They're a little bit higher, but that's not the story. But if we think about the demographic of African Americans in the United States, we make up roughly around 20%. So that means we'd have to multiply our efforts right now by at least 10 to be somewhat much more equitable or to match that. It took over a generation for the Landscape magazine to feature African Americans on the cover from its 1992 first issue of African American Landscape Architects. And it happened to happen during a time of a pandemic when people said, oh my goodness, look at the social injustice, look at the health disparities and alike. And so they reached out and several of us are featured in that. So I recommend you taking a look at that issue to think a little bit further about the challenges that we face as a whole. Because if we think about climate change, it's not going to just happen on one side of the street. It rains on the just as well as the unjust. Another important thing is to think about research. I know we have quantitative research, but this is qualitative in my efforts. So it's in terms of grounded theory, ethnography, as well as immersion within certain communities so that you have a really deep understanding and commitment and not just sort of an armchair scholarship or chumming or just hanging out. You really have to build the trust, the sharing, and the collective efficacy, the social capital around engaging. So this is also about cultural capital. So you have to know something. So these are just a few of the sources that I'm sure you're going to be checking out at the library or adding to your library at home personally. This is so important when you think about where we are here in DC, that it impacted integration in the United States. These two, this husband and wife team and their children, the Clarks, they're psychologists, and their work, one of their seminal works is the Black Baby Doll Test. So you probably have seen it even rendered by Oprah Winfrey, but people are doing it all over the world. But the crux of that research really gets at the young age, even around kindergarten or so, a little bit after, a young person starts to see just by observation of who belongs and who does not belong. So if they do not see themselves present in certain places, they begin to get an impression that this is not for me. And hopefully that's not the case for landscape architecture. So we have to do something about that. Another person that really, the late great Toni Morrison. I encourage you all to read her novels, read her nonfiction work. She's got children's books she's published with one of her sons. In fact, she was here at Howard University as a student. I think she was even Miss Howard at one point. Yeah, exactly. And she married an architect, so there's a longer story, but you'll get into that. But these are 11 characteristics that you see in the dreadlocks of her hair that I've rendered in an image here of her characteristics that makes a black novel. So I thought about what makes a black landscape. But she has an information in her novels, in her work, that covers over 400 years of history of the African American experience in this landscape. The content, the importance of this is that African American communities, almost regardless of class or status, not necessarily character, right? Because that's a whole nother story. But we are exposed to a number of environmental issues just problematic. And so these sources are the ones that actually, a few of them, that show the challenges, but also some way forward. And so Dorceta Taylor's Toxic Communities, Harriet Washington's A Terrible Thing to Waste, and even McIntyre in terms of her ethnography called Inner City Kids, where the youth are leading some of the efforts with their state representatives to change policy. In that case, these young folks chose the topic of trash and debris. We need to partner with other organizations that are in the community in terms of STEAM professions. This is one I work with as an AmeriCorps Vista in Chicago called Project Exploration. And this was during the pandemic. You see us with our mask on, even in public space. So landscape became very important and central for public gathering and sense of community. One organization I work with is the National Organization of Minority Architects. I'm one of the board of directors for the Illinois chapter. And the Project Pipeline program that they have, you can look at it online. But one of the things we do have is the summer camp, which goes for about 3.5 days, where they get to go through designing their house, designing their street, and designing a skyscraper, and putting all these pieces together to make a community. And they get to visit Willis Tower and a whole bunch of other cool things. But landscape is not at the central, it's sort of background. So LAF has allowed me to go from being a background to now being someone who helps to spotlight landscape architecture much more front and center as a main actor and a producer in particular. And this is my team this past year, and they were one of the #1 presenters among the several participants. We had a little bit over 100 participants from the 5th grade on up. But I'm not doing anything that's totally unique and new in all of itself. We do have efforts with the American Society of Landscape Architects, Dream Big. Even our Illinois chapter is doing some things. In fact, they will be part of one of my productions later this month. I look to other examples with the Cooperative Extension Services, their certificate programs for the Master Gardeners, and even Botanic Gardens in Chicago and their programs, because these are individuals who are working at the design level, but also those rudimentary elements of shaping the earth, the open building envelope of hardscapes, as well as plant material, those 3 elements that make up the tangible elements of landscape architecture in the physical form. One of our past fellows, her work in terms of Future Landscape Architects of America, which looks at curriculum, is so critically important, as well as some of our other sister organizations like ACE Mentor Program with architecture, construction, and engineering. Speaking of curriculum, because I teach at the university level, and I'm like, wait a minute, what do I know about K through 12? There's a lot more to it, and things have to meet certain standards. So this is a recent publication of one of our professors in the city of Chicago at the University of Illinois, Chicago's campus, Goldie Muhammad. And I encourage you to go check out this book called Unearthing Joy. And look at the plants on the cover. And even Pharrell Williams did the forward, so it's an extraordinary piece. And it's about a guide for culturally and historically responsive teaching and learning. But I also thought about, how do I reach this population? You know, they're looking at me thinking, oh, I'm telling stories to them, and they say, oh, that was back in the 1900s. They are rendering me in terms of my age. So anything before 2000, ladies and gentlemen, even the graduate students, some of them I teach, it's been 24 years, so they don't know about a lot of things, at least not personally. But film and television has had a certain level of impact to reach them in terms of not necessarily doing TikTok, but maybe YouTube and some other forms, just to kind of spark their interest and get them to see and ask them questions, and maybe even at some point in time pick up a book. But in the meantime, Claiming Open Space by Austin Allen is one of those seminal works, which focuses on African Americans' use of public space, and it still is very critical. And a couple of years before that, the precursor and the kernel for that documentary in some form actually came from international competition or an event called AmeriFlora. And to let you know, I was actually there as among the only black team of competitors in Ohio at AmeriFlora. So I have some personal connection. But thinking about film too, we would be remiss if we didn't talk about the Eberts. Roger Ebert, who's a University of Illinois graduate, much like myself, but Chaz Ebert, who is at the helm of it since Roger has passed away. And she has a new book out. It's called It's Time to Give Effect. Okay, I didn't say that. It's about elevating humanity through forgiveness, empathy, compassion, and kindness. One of her quotes in that book, she says, "Through film and other media, we are helping to move things in the direction of love, unity, empathy every day." And Roger, I had a chance to meet him before he passed, he has always championed that films of all of the arts, interestingly enough, is one that helps to create empathy among humanity. Now, I have to admit, I've been involved with the Ebert Film Festival as a moviegoer, a volunteer, and more recently, the last few years, since the pandemic, as a panelist. Chaz has invited me. But I also think about my horticultural roots. I work with the florist who worked with the little house down the street on Pennsylvania Avenue. I didn't work with her at that time, but anyhow, I still work with her now out of the Hyde Park florist. So how do I combine some of these things, bring them together into something that has meaning and impact? I worked in popular film and television, over 30 productions of different popular film and TV productions, including the one you see here with Chicago Med. No, I am not an MD, I'm a PhD, but I can play one. And it's important, even on public broadcasts where I actually do talk, and that's on the Mid-American Gardener Show, and that's for nearly 2 decades. And much like the Clark's work in terms of being able to see yourselves, Maya Angelou talked about how it's important that we see ourselves because we live in direct correlation with our heroes and sheroes of time. So what do I do about this? I don't need to reinvent the wheel. So let's partner. People are already local experts in their communities. Get out and make some friends and give them some ideas and work with them on needs-based projects, things that young folks are asking for, where they already have some local institutions, nonprofits, government agencies, et cetera, and we as landscape architects can be in the mix and be the special sauce. So what does this look like? If you look right here, you see a number of different things. You see that I have Christy Weber. We did the National Minorities in Agriculture. We also work with a number of the Southside Community Arts Center, the last of the WP Art Centers in the United States. It is in Chicago, and Eleanor Roosevelt, she dedicated that back well before I was even on this planet. Territory on the west side of Chicago, a vacant lot program. I mentioned NOMA earlier. There I am doing Japanese flower arranging as a model for landscape. We did National Parking Day, which you'll hear about in a moment. We did National Honeybee Day with a job recidivism program. We had face painting. We did the bee suits and nobody got stung, thank God. We did a wonderful Kaboom design planter bench. And we also learned about careers in the green industry. Susan Hines, one of our editors for the Landscape magazine, gave us a quote years ago, and I'm paraphrasing. Singularly, film and television established the images of landscape architecture in the public imagination. For all of the hard work we do, film does it 10 times, if not more, over. So with that, what does a production look like? And this is one that is in its editing stage. I have completed one, but this is one that I want to share right now.
So this is National Parking Day, which started in San Francisco as a kind of guerrilla garden intervention where parking spaces were taken over to make parklets as a little bit of a commentary on how cars have taken over our urban centers.
Today is stunning experience of community outreach. As you notice, it started out today with the individuals coming out from the botanical gardens and replenishing the garden, which is for Dr. Nate Thomas.
He was just a connector and One of his famous quotes, which I hope you saw on the side of our building, was talent is all around, but often overlooked. He was really for the underdog people that maybe you couldn't see or didn't have the highest GPA. And he sort of always went to make sure that they were recognized and had the same opportunities and was able to fulfill their same dreams.
In a nutshell, he really was devoted to making sure that Black and Hispanic kids understood that STEM was for them.
Today's event is an accumulation of a lot of hard work amongst a lot of different groups. They interviewed our African American alumni who were really, their whole life was impacted by Nate's work. In the 80s and the 70s and somewhere into the 90s, Nate's work really opened the doors for African Americans in engineering, construction, architecture, computer science in ways that had never happened before.
The thing that I think is really profound about his impact and why we have dedicated this medal is that replenishing the garden, it's symbolic, setting the seeds. Nate has set so many seeds of talented African Americans. Encouraging is many of these have had kids who've gone on into engineering. Some have actually had their children come to the school and to become legacy.
We want this garden to be used by everyone, young and old, and we wanted to let them know, again, this is your garden. We want them to see these are the seeds that you're planting today, and then they'll come back next spring and they'll see how beautiful they are, and they learned about all these different species.
Illinois Tech is open for business, offering an invitation for you to come.
So that's one of the many documentaries. And I just want to quickly point out, it's up to each of us, as Chaz Heber says, to get creative about how we care, about how we challenge ourselves to think bigger about our contributions and to give effect in every way we can. So my ask is to gain cultural capital, gain social capital in the communities of need, partner for needs-based projects, mentor and fund those. So send me your many links to many documentaries. If you can't, I'll come out and work with you on trying to produce one. And thank you.